Ever feel like you just are never going to be able to keep up with your yoga instructor's breath cues and in and out because you just can't breathe? Or feel like you can't go into the full expression of a posture because when you're in it, it restricts your ability to breathe? If that's the case, then this yoga half breath video is for you. Today, we're going to be discussing the mechanics of breathing in yoga and how it relates. And then I'm going to give you some hacks to be able to pull out so you can actually connect with your breath in any yoga class. So this will be a little bit different than my usual hack videos that usually have a breath, strength, and mobility drill. These are all going to be breath hacks. So let's do some learning. So when we breathe, there's a bunch of different things that are supposed to be happening. So when you breathe in an optimal way and you have optimal ranges of motion in your pelvis and in your body, what happens is your chest rises, your side of your rib cage rises, and so does the back of your rib cage, expanding out like 360 degrees like a balloon. Your diaphragm descends into your down here, pressing your organs down towards your pelvic bowl. Your pelvis then opens up into external rotation, opening up like a flower, receiving that pressure coming down from your organs and allowing it to go here. Now, this part in your inhale, that diaphragm coming down, the pelvis opening, is what helps create stability in your spine as you inhale. And that's what gives you the ability to brace your core and protect your low back. Now, as you exhale, and this is usually where we hear about bracing the core, even though both inhaling and exhaling should be bracing your core, what happens, breathing happens in reverse. So your pelvis goes more into internal rotation, pressing the organs up and allowing for a more structural stacking of the bones to create stability. So your pelvis kind of goes more into internal rotation. Those organs come up and your diaphragm comes up. So that's why you need the structural support in that exhale, because you're losing the support stabilization of your diaphragm. So as that diaphragm comes up, your rib cage should be coming down to meet your pelvis, getting it that structure, that skeletal stack. Then your side of your ribs come in, back of your ribs, your chest comes down. Now, as we go through life and get compressed in everyday life, the way we compensate really can affect our ability for our rib cage to do that. And if you can't do that, that will affect your ability to breathe in different yoga poses. For example, if you're doing a yoga pose, such as child's pose, where you're putting a lot of compression on your lower rib cage, and if that's where the only place you can breathe, then you're not going to feel like you can breathe in the full expression of child's pose. So that's why we need to loosen it if you're wanting to breathe in poses. So the way we lose range of motion is a lot of times the first thing we lose is our ability for our pelvis to internally rotate. And so then from there, we lose the ability for the rib cage to come down to meet it. And then we lose the ability for our rib cage to come out to the side. And then we get compression where we lose our ability for the rib cage to extend back. And then we end up where I would say a good portion of the population basically lives with the only ability to breathe in the upper part of the chest. And then unfortunately, this can get compressed too. And when that gets compressed too, your head starts coming forward. So you're compressed here, then your head will start coming forward naturally, because that is your body's ability looking for a place to be able to expand, to be able to actually breathe. And that's why when you see a lot of people in the later stages of life have that hunch forward head posture, because they're being compressed on all sides, and this is their only way that they can breathe. Now, fortunately, we do have the ability to back out of these layers and to loosen up our rib cage. Which will allow us to breathe. Now, the hard part of this is as we get compressed and we lose the ability to breathe, we also lose the mental connection with our rib cage to actually be able to feel our breath. And that ability to feel the breath is really key if you want to be able to do that smooth yoga following the breath cues in your yoga classes, or be able to get the full expression, feeling in your yoga poses. So we are going to be discussing ways how to release, what we need to do to release different parts of our rib cage. So we're going to do basically our hacks. I'm going to do a hack for each position of our rib cage to release that you can apply to different yoga poses so that you can look for that expansion while you're doing your yoga poses. Now, a lot of yoga classes start with warming up the spine in all directions, seated or in a cat-cow. And so if you know these things, that will give you the ability to expand your rib cage while you're in the warm-up section of your yoga class so that you'll be able to optimize your breathing through the rest of the class. So let's get to it. We'll start with the back of our rib cage. So the back of our rib cage, to what you were thinking and what you want to look for to be able to get that breathing into that space between your shoulder blades, is you want to be able to pull your shoulder blades apart. And as you breathe in, you're going to feel the separation of the shoulder blades. And then exhale, pulling your rib cage down to belt line. Now, this happens in a few different poses in the beginning, such as a cat-cow. So in cat-cow, in cat, you round up, pressing your spine up towards the sky. Now, traditional cueing says to exhale in that pose. But if you need expansion in your rib cage, you can actually flip that. So as you're coming in that cat, into that cat-cow, you can expand up, inhaling, increasing that expansion in the back of your rib cage. And exhale, dropping when you lift. Inhale, coming up. And especially if you focus on pulling those shoulder blades rather than trying to round or tuck your low pelvis, you can think about separating the shoulder blades, pulling up, and breathing into the back of your rib cage, getting that expansion. Now, there's bunch of different moves in the yoga warm-up that does that. For example, the easy seated fold. That is another good yoga hack there to breathe into separating your rib cage and removing that compression in the back of your rib cage while you're in your yoga class. Now, for the front of the rib cage. The front of the rib cage is a bit more tricky, but you have different poses that can help decompress it. The most basic one being prep work for an inverted table or reverse tabletop, where you put your hands down here. If you have anything that brings your hands here, you can think about pulling your chest apart, going here, breathing into that front of the chest, loosening. And doing that all the way into your inverted. And then you can do that in any pose in yoga that takes your hands behind your back. So if you bring and you interlace your hands behind your back, say in a peaceful warrior or things, but that's just all you're looking for, is that motion that's opening up that chest back. And then you think about breathing into your chest here, opening up that part of your chest. Now, the side of your rib cage can be a little bit more tricky, but it can be done depending on your yoga class. So if your yoga class has any kind of side bending or even a plank, you can get a side plank, you can get that expansion in your rib cage. So let's go with the seated side bend. If you take your arm up, lifting up, anchoring the same hip down as that you're lifting, you can think about lifting your rib cage away from your belt line, coming down into that side bend. And this is really opening up here where you can really send your breath here and feel this part of your rib cage expanding out. And then you can deepen breathing into it with each inhale. And then of course you come up, root into that same hip, lifting your rib cage away, inhaling. And then bonus work here, extra core work and things like that, then you can think about exhaling, pulling that rib cage back down to belt line as you come center. So, like I said, so any standing side bends there, reverse warrior, reverse triangle, things like that, that has that lift and arch there, you can use that to get that motion back in your rib cage. And then once you are actually able to have that freedom in your rib cage, it'll make it a lot easier to inhale when you're supposed to inhale, exhale when you're supposed to exhale. So there are some thoughts of like what is happening in your rib cage, and some things you can think about to try to incorporate into your own practice to get that awareness and loosening up your rib cage in all the different directions so that you can breathe. Now, for a bonus here, the ability to go into internal rotation really affects a lot of your yoga practice and your breathing. So I'm going to give you one bonus move here on how to easily, not easy, but a good way to get your hips to go more into internal rotation and actually get your side breathing at the same time. And it's pretty simple. All you got to do is lay on your side. Bonus if you have some kind of weight or a small child to sit on you. But we're just going to come down to our side. You can have your legs more out, but the goal is to get them up to 90. You're going to find the top part of your pelvis, the bony part that's right at the top, and you're going to try to sink it into the mat. You're going to relax your head down. You're going to kind of curve forward. So what we're doing here is the pressure of laying here onto the floor, with that bony part of your hip on the floor, it's forcing that bottom hip into internal rotation. And this is good. And then as you breathe, you can feel the back of your shoulder expanding. So you can get some of that posterior expansion. You have all the blood coming to the bottom of your rib cage. That's kind of forcing the expansion of the side on the bottom. It's all good. It's good. And then, like I said, bonus, if you can weight your hip here by putting a weight, or like I said, having your small child or even your husband or girlfriend or whatever come sit on you right here and press you down, it can really open up that hip's ability to go into internal rotation pretty quick. It's a pretty quick, nice release. So I'm on my right side, so I would suggest starting on your right side because your right side has more internal rotation naturally for most people. So you want to end on the left side. So coming down, finding that top of your hip bone into the mat, bringing it forward, and then here, and just breathing. So inhaling, exhaling, bringing that rib cage down, feeling that pressure in that hip. Might feel a little bit more uncomfortable on the left because, like I said, it's more, your left side is more in external rotation, so you might feel a little bit of that shifting. And you just do that for a few breaths, and then that gives some genuine range of motion back in your pelvis. So then not only do you have that expansion in your hips, in your chest, it's going down into your hips. So that one is like really hard to do in a yoga class. So could be a good prep pose before you start class while you're waiting on your mat to get that internal rotation back in your hips. And that will help the rest of your breathing. So I hope that helps, and I hope that makes sense. Please check out the rest of our optimal posture videos where I have warm-ups and cool downs and exercises. Also check out my yoga hack videos, which has going through and using this kind of biomechanics works and structural work for your poses. So enjoy the rest of the yoga hack playlist, and I hope to see you in another video.